Hey everybody, welcome to Scotch for Dummies Thursday night. Tonight we're going to be talking about Scotch whiskey production and the three main ingredients, which is water, yeast, and barley. We're going to get into it in detail. Stay tuned.
What's up, guys?
Hey guys, Scotch for Dummies here.
How's it going?
Good. Mike's up. Mike's are working
Mike's
today.
working
Very
so
good.
far.
We got video.
Wow. So we're at a different location. This is my place tonight. Something different, something for a change. You know it's only three of us versus four. Sean is working tonight. He may or may not join us. We'll
Maybe.
see. But
We'll
we've
see.
got a lot to talk about.
We do. It was actually enough to maybe break into a few shows, but we're going to try to get into it tonight. Who knows where we go with it, but it's going to be kind of fun. It's going to get a little geeky, a little nerdy on some details. Thankfully, we've got this guy right here because
He's going to be talking a lot.
But
Yep.
happy, I pulled an Andrew. Happy Thursday, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. And cheers to everybody out there.
Cheers.
Dying to see what's in your glass.
Looking forward to a long weekend, by the way.
Yes, I may actually take half a day off tomorrow.
I am too.
Started with a SMWS 30.109, which is a Glenrothes, strangely soothing. And Drew has warned me that I'm going to need to water the F out of it.
He's
because
going to need to have some serious water because it's going to punch him in the gut.
64.9.
So I will let you know how that goes. What do you guys got?
I have the Kevland here. This is the Kevland Select Distillery, 43% ABV. I know it's not Scotch, but a good whiskey. It's still a good whiskey.
I'm drinking
So-
it too, actually. It's nice change pace, a little warm up. It's pretty
Yeah, it's
good.
like brown sugar and all this richness.
I
and
was
it's really
saying Twizzlers and
Yeah.
licorice and a bunch of other stuff, and a little brown sugar on the palate.
Man,
it's
that's all-
nice.
yeah.
It's nice. So who do we have on the show tonight
Who
so
do
far?
we have on the show
We've
tonight?
got a bunch of people watching. We scroll back up. We got Bob. Of course, Bob's on.
Bobby.
Eric Waite.
Eric Wade, yeah.
Hey, Eric.
Three ingredients, he says. Haggis, bagpipes,
And Brew.
and Edinburgh.
I'm down with that.
Trooper Henry, go ahead.
Yep, Nurse Dave's Shaving World, Scotch Down Under. Good day, all.
Good day.
Hey, Shaving World. I love it, man.
George Kaplan, Rob Gilmore, Justin O, Mark J.G. Hopefully all safe from the hurricane. And should be.
Hopefully.
They
Think
kind of
so.
missed them a little bit.
Just saw
Stephen
Steven.
Rogers, yeah, Trooper Henry, Bobby J.
So those guys on the
Zach Tom, yeah, those guys
pre-show.
are on the
Hey,
pre-show.
if anybody's wondering, Zach is not drinking Balcones right now.
No way.
I think the world is going to end tomorrow because of that. So we'll see. John Kranz is in there. Greg Lewis, Kevin Bloom, Greg Bowers. I saw Greg Bowers was at a run through for a whiskey club the other day. And
Hey,
so I
did
saw a picture
did
of
Sunday Evening Scotch make that too? I know we didn't, but it looked like a good time. I saw
that. Yeah,
pictures of it.
so everybody's wearing masks. The only person I could recognize was Greg because he wasn't wearing a mask at the time. He was kind of off to the
Was he
side.
wearing a kilt?
I don't think so. But he was social distancing and wasn't all masked up, so that's all different. Wheels, Neo Jake, DB is she. Hey, she's in there.
It's
Yeah.
D is not a man.
No.
That's what it says.
D's not a man. Okay.
That's 'cause she's-
Malt Minion, Kim Rederick, Scott.
Oh, geez.
Man, keep going. We got lots of people here.
We do.
Anybody?
Emily's on.
Yeah,
Neo
we just saw
Jake.
her.
Neo Jake.
Mac
Some
18.
Mac 18,
Nice.
alright,
Good for
alright.
you.
Very
dude.
nice.
That's just-
Alejandro, yeah, there he is. Paul Marco.
He's drinking some Knob Creek, 12-year-old. Man, I haven't
What
had
was
Knob Creek in a
Alejandro
long-
drinking? We just saw it a few seconds ago on the pre-show. What-
He was drinking Green?
No, he was drinking the Glengoyne 10?
12.
12.
Dude,
Glengoyne
yep,
12,
yep. Going
Yeah.
12. You're right.
Yep.
You're right. Good call.
George Kaplan.
yeah. Everwind, hey.
Everyone, yeah, ahoy. And I think we made it through right so far. SoCal
SoCal
Dram.
Dram, yeah.
All right. There we go. Thanks for clarifying. You got it, no problem. So,
So good people.
It's good to see you,
46
D.
people watching right now. It's great.
Yeah.
Love to see you all here.
Scroll back up on these comments real quick. There was there was something I was going to point out, and now I don't even know what it was, but it was because we were scrolling through them fast. And Kevin Bloom, all right, hey Kevin. Kim Rederick, just saw that guy too. John Kranz, cheers.
oh, nice.
Keep going up here, Bobby J.
Where is Lee? We're missing Lee.
We are missing Lee, yeah.
We need Scotch on the Bayou.
I think that's everybody, buddy.
Yeah, I missed what I was going to say, but so tonight, you guys, we've got a lineup of a topic, and we're going to lean on you guys to provide some information as well. There's a ton of information out there, and I don't know what rabbit hole we get down, because there's three main topics that we're going to talk about, right? Barley, yeast, and water. And I'll be upfront and say that in researching for this, honestly, one of the main themes that I was getting from a lot of the articles I was reading was how little of an influence one of these ingredients had, and I can't dispute it because I'm just a Scotch for Dummy, right? But part of me wants to say, I don't know about that, and I hope to get into that discussion when we get into that ingredient, because I was like, I don't buy that. I think it actually has more of an influence than that. But maybe it's because I've been listening to all the ambassadors out there, right? And listening and reading all the marketing and being like, oh man, it comes from that lock. Yeah. Right?
Drawn from the lock.
Yeah. Before we get too carried away, let's go ahead and open our podcast so I can have something to edit.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
All right, we'll have to just, somebody say Sean for him. He's not here.
All
right, 3, 2, what's up, guys?
Hey, guys, it is Scotch for Dummies.
Welcome to Scotch for Dummies, 4 guys on the Scotch journey to help you with your next Scotch purchase. I'm Drew.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Mark.
And Sean
is not here.
Sean!
Sean's not here tonight. Maybe he joins us later. Hopefully he joins us later, but if not, we're going to cover down.
Yeah, since there's not 4 dummies, we're going to do Scotch with dummies today.
Dummies.
Bring you all in and provide your comments, let us know additional information.
But for those podcast listeners, we're going to talk about 3 ingredients of Scotch whiskey, what it takes to make the whiskey, so the barley, the yeast, and the water, and we're going to get
your
down
barley, your yeast, and water.
Thanks. I want to be yeast.
I'll be the dummy.
Yeah.
And don't forget, we're going to talk about our review this week as well,
Yes.
which was, I believe, the Chivas 18.
Chivas 18.
Chivas 18.
Chivas
Do we
18.
even have a bottle of
We
that?
didn't bring it over.
Oh.
But we can talk through it.
All right, so
We
we'll
got
have
it
to drink the
We can drink one of these and talk
That was
through it.
stupid.
Chig 18, is it?
Yeah. It's okay. But no, so let's kick off the Chivas 18. It was a pretty good dram. I'm going to pull the score real quick and double check it, but we actually really enjoyed it.
So, we talked about it not too long ago, and we actually got into some Chivas, multiple bottles of Chivas, a while back in our journey. I mean, we're 5 years in now, so this was like 2.5, 3 years in. I remember we had a bottle of Chivas Altus. I think we had a bottle of 12. We might have had a bottle of 18 at the time, and so it's not the first time we've ran across the bottle. Mm-hmm. I like Chivas. Honestly, I like Chivas more than I thought I would before I was introduced to it. Right, I was a Johnny Walker guy.
Yeah.
So I was always, Chivas, that's the competitor. But you know what? They put out a really good quality product, and it's enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think we found over the last few years that some of these blended scotches are not as bad as you think they would be.
Right.
So there are some that are really bad, and I will tell you that up front. But some of the age statement Dewar's and Chivas and Johnny Walkers, really, they do their best to create a whiskey that kind of hits everybody's palate. I mean, it's not going to be too peated. It's not going to be too sweet. It's just kind of this middle of the road Scotch that has a good balance of flavors, and they do a good job at it.
If you want to take it to the end of the spectrum and show, what blends really can do, you open up a compass box, right? They're really pushing the envelope of
True.
But honestly, some of these blends like the Chivas and the Johnny Walkers and whatnot, like you said, they're hitting a wide palette that's approachable, it's enjoyable. No, it's not going to blow your mind or wow you. Although the Chivas 18, I think, is pretty damn good for the price point that it comes in at.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good everyday drinker.
Right. There's a few other Chivas that I wouldn't mind really spending some time with. I'm actually curious about the one they made for that football team. I just,
the 13-year-old?
For what,
for
United?
Manchester United.
Come on, right?
Yeah.
You kind of want to get a bottle just to say. I think they have a bottle over at Payless.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I think I saw a bottle of it, yeah.
Okay,
Well,
go there.
So Manchester United has more fans in the U.S. than they do in Manchester. So they only released that bottle in the U.S., which is kind of odd.
Makes sense.
So when we do finally go storm the beaches over there, Scotch, we need to take a couple bottles of it because
Hey, would you like to try this? Like, what's this? I've never seen this.
What is this stuff? Never had it
So,
before.
what were some of the comments on this review?
So I don't remember what did we say the price was for that? Did somebody recall? Because
I think it was like 80 or 80
I
or
want to
90.
say it was $80, 80 or 89.
So one of the guys says it was 100 in Chicago. A lot of people are agreeing with us. That they also agree that it's a good Scotch as well. Sean, yes, I messed up Sean's rating on that one. And then sometimes we get questions that are interesting, like this one. It says, "Why do all reviewers of whiskey talk, like grain is a bad thing?"
Completely fair question.
And I think because a lot of us drink single malts, we don't get into grains that much. But we have learned just through our journey that there's some really good grain whiskey out there. And John Glazier is a really good advocate of.
He's
Sure.
a big fan of.
He is.
The thing about grain whiskey is typically they're distilled in like a column still or a coffee still, and so it strips out most of the flavor out of it. So it's not really rich and flavorful like some of the malt whiskeys, and that's really the reason. You can still do lots of things with aging and barreling and different barrel finishes and things like that. So you can still bring it up, but it's just generally a really light, cotton candy sweet kind of whiskey, and so it doesn't have that punch that like I like in my rich, peated whiskeys and things.
So I'll say this though, if you want to talk about the grains, and the grains that you're getting in these blends are not matured, aged grains that you might get in a single grain. You get some single grain, some 30-year-old single grain, and you're like, wow,
But
that is really, my eyes are opened. Wow, grain has something to offer. That's not what they're putting in blends, let's be honest.
Well, that Chivas 18 has got to be an 18-year-old grain.
Sure, yeah, it does have to be an 18-year-old grain. Obviously, because it's an 18-year-old age statement, but I'm not saying what they're putting in there is bad quality. There is some, like you said, there's $12 blends on the shelf, right? That I don't want to touch, but I think we need to spend more time in the grain world, in the single grain world, and actually do some young ones, some middle-aged ones, and then get
That
into
would be
some
really
of those,
interesting,
30 pluses, because they're affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think my palate is sophisticated enough to nuance those because they're just so light that I just don't pull much out of them.
What are you saying? It's not your wheelhouse?
No, I will.
We knew that going into that
It's
conversation.
still a journey.
It is
Right,
a journey,
it is
yeah,
a
and
journey.
I'll explore it. And I think if we can figure out a way to set that up, that would be really interesting. Maybe get some. Oh yeah, we'll just have to find some.
But to finish the conversation on blends, we've gone back and gotten into some old blends, right? Some 80s versions blends, and back in the day, blends were it. Nobody was drinking single malt, right? So it's kind of funny that the single malts have taken over now, and people look down on the blends when they used to be at the top of the mountain. There's still some quality blends out there that are enjoyable, and you should have on your bar for the price point.
And I don't know why the blends necessarily have gone downhill as far as richness and potency and all that kind of stuff. So that's a fair question.
So did you scroll up just a little bit
What do you
there?
got?
And
Comments
so
coming in?
yeah, undercover judger. Guys, I think you guys need to get into a Big Daddy bottle soon. We're due to see a $500 plus bottle. All right, you called us out. I won't disagree with you. You're absolutely right. I'll be honest and tell you that we refrain from doing those bottles for the most part because those aren't bottles that everyday drinkers that people are going to go to a liquor store and buy. And
Yep.
we really are trying to help people on that everyday journey. Doesn't mean we're not against it because we've obviously done a couple of Big Daddy bottles, right? And I'm all for it,
Yeah.
man. So you guys got to talk the treasurer of Scotch for Dummies here, the guys with the band, and he's pretty squeaky. So if you can talk him into dropping 500 on a bottle,
Or
I'm
if
all
you
in.
happen to get one of the Glendronach, the Kingsman, and what it said is like 4 ounces of it. We do the review and we give you all the credit in the world.
I want one of those bottles, so I'm not going to tell him when it does come to my house because he's going to want more. Oh boy! So let's get into a couple more of these comments, and then let's dive into to the topic.
So Everwind has a question. You would argue that if you had the 3 ingredients and put them into plastic or steel, even for time, it would be the same spirit. It would be technically still be Scotch, but it would not. It would lose about 60% of the flavor. So I don't know. Plus, it would never like mature and settle and take off all that heat and the edginess of it because you wouldn't have the barrel.
Yeah.
So
And Alejandro says he read somewhere that grain can make the blend more creamy and highlight the flavor of the malt. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It would be kind of a cool experiment to do.
well, yeah. I mean that's where we've had some of those old
Yes.
grains, and they're sweet. They're
The vintage
light.
stuff,
They're
yeah.
very subtle. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that was it. I mean, at the end of the day,
I don't even remember what we
I
scored.
think
What was the
it
overall?
was
2.5.
I think it was like 2.5-ish, 2.8, something like that. I don't
Man, if
remember
we only
exactly.
did a research, I only
I
had an
know.
internet device that we could look
I
up
know,
this stuff.
but at the end of the day, it's a worthy bottle to buy, and I would have it as everyday drinker. I mean, it's actually even better than everyday drinker. I mean, it's an 18-year-old.
It is.
So.
It's finer than that. It's a little
Yeah,
expensive.
not to tell on myself right now, but I got too many open bottles at home, so I'm not.
Yeah.
Bunker Commander has confessed.
I'm not going out to buy any bottles for everyday drinkers. I got to get rid of some of my everyday drinkers, even though they're not everyday drinkers.
2.875.
2.875 says Tom R. All right, so I won't have to research that. I'm going to shut it down. So, you guys want to eeny, meeny, miny, go on one of these three topics? You know, it's 3 ingredients. It's not that complex. Let's think about it from a production standpoint. What starts first? Probably the barley. Got to go get the barley.
Gotta grow it.
Without barley, there's nothing.
Got to go get the barley and take care of the barley. So, the barley.
All right, references. What are we gonna hit? Mark did a lot of research and found
One
some
of the
good stuff
things
here.
Kick us
that
off.
just the first note that to talk about barley, I want to make note of is so there's all these rules, right, about making Scotch. One of which is it has to be distilled where? Scotland,
Mhm.
right? Has to be aged
Scotland.
in Scotland. The barley does
And
not have to come from Scotland.
Where do you want it to come from?
Well, I'll be damned, right? So, very little of the barley overall, and if you're looking at the industry as a whole, very little of the barley comes from Scotland.
Right,
There
it's
are
imported.
some distilleries that are definitely doing locally grown. Bruichladi's one of them. You know, there's some. Kilhoman does some. But by and large, most of the barley comes from the UK, Canada, Australia. So there's when you're looking at percentage-wise, there's very little that actually comes from
This
Scotland.
article says most of the barley used in Scotch is produced in
In
Scotch English.
In English,
Right.
East Coast.
Which the English down in southern England is the growing season for barley is different than up in Scotland.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Interestingly enough, how many different types of barley are there? Right, there's I want to say 5,500 different types of barley in the world right
in the
now.
world, but not for Scotch.
No, not for Scotch, absolutely not. But we start with the big number just to give you guys an
Yeah.
idea of where that is, and then what's it really shrink down to. So, barley is rated on a 1 to 9 scale. For what, I don't know, but only the top 3 are actually considered for distillation purposes. And of that, there's like 9 or 10 barleys that are used for
Yeah.
Scotch. That are
You should be Commander Scotch.
Right.
you know, I
Bunker
mean,
Commander.
I read a bunch of it. The problem is retaining what I read, you guys.
Yeah.
So we're trying to pull this up and really get into some of the details. There are some really good articles out there.
Yeah, I mean,
Ooh, what's
look at
that?
that.
It's a malt blend.
So, Dr. Scotch told me that he was doing some research on barley. He put together content for a Dr. Scotch episode that Drew refuses to record.
That was actually pretty
Someone's
good.
getting punched.
He went on the offensive that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could talk about 2-row barleys and 6-row barleys and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, ultimately, Scotch, they need the sugars, the starches. They don't want proteins. They're not feeding animals. They don't need any of that. They want as much starch. And so, typically, 2-row, I think, is
It is.
predominantly more
6-row
starches,
is your
more
feed.
protein. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
feed. And actually, the bushels per acre is just about the same whether you do 2-row or 6-row.
About a ton different.
But out of how many?
An acre.
But out of how many tons per acre?
I want to say it was like 3 tons for 6-row and 2 tons for. It's on one of these articles,
Okay.
you guys. So
Yeah.
Trooper Henry says Golden Promise. Ironically enough, Golden Promise really isn't used anymore.
It is. It's used more rarely because it doesn't have the
Production
yield.
yield.
Yeah, it doesn't have the yield.
Yep.
I mean, admittedly, these Scotch distilleries are all about yield. I want to know how many liters of spirit can I get per ton of grain, because all that shipping, and you're all on an island, and you want to maximize your profit there.
And they really get into the raw details of how much sugar a particular strain of barley, 2-row barley is going to produce, because the more sugar that it's got, the more that yeast can come in and eat up and turn into alcohol,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's crazy how they do that. So most of these distilleries do purchase their barley from wherever, but it's at a very detailed and specific standard.
Yes.
It's not just, hey, we're going to need 55 tons. No, it's we need this.
Yep. And so they'll say that they'll put out a bid. I need so many tons of this barley, and then the farmers can bid on it. It's like, all right, I will take 40 tons or whatever and of that bid, and I'll produce that. In fact, sometimes the distillers will actually even give them the seed, or provide the seed, or arrange for the seed to be given to them so they get the right grain.
Well, when there are some distilleries, we talked about it earlier, that are actually doing local grown type stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So they're actually controlling exactly what kind of barley. And to me, if I'm an owner of one of these big distilleries, that's a little more risky. Mm-hmm. That's definitely more costly, and you're definitely putting yourself out there a little bit more, because there's more variables that can go wrong on you, as opposed to you just purchasing from somebody else. This is exactly what I want, so you know what you're getting. They're growing this, and they're hoping that things go out right, and they're hoping they get the yield, so many bushels per acre or whatever, tons, however they weigh it. It seems more risky to me. I guess maybe that's why those bottles are actually more costly. If you look at like a Spring Rank local barley, it costs
that makes sense.
Costs a little more jacked up on that bottle, right?
You pay more per grain, yeah.
Right, exactly.
So anyway, tell me now we've got this barley. There's I think there's 10 different types that are actually used in Scotch malt, Scotch whiskey production. Obviously, there's like 2 or 3 that are really popular, and almost all the distilleries use. But once they purchase this barley, whatever strain of barley it is, here we go, we get it. What do they do with it? Let's talk about what happens to this barley.
First, you got to malt it.
You got to malt it. All right, so single malt, that's a big word. What's malting mean?
Basically, you want the grain to sprout. So you take that barley, you saturate it in water, bring the alcohol or the water content up to like 45%, I think it is, in the grain itself. So it comes in about, see, this is all Dr. Scotch stuff.
It's okay.
If he was only here, it'd be great. So it's
He's
like,
here in spirit.
it comes in at like 12 or 13% water content, and then they soak it in water, and they basically wash it several times, bring it up to like 45%, and then put it on the floor and keep it warm, and just let it sprout, essentially.
So those seeds are literally opening up, and they're thinking they're getting ready to grow into the ground. We're tricking it.
Yeah, I mean, there's even graphics there's reports where they've sliced the grain. You can actually see the endosperm growing and all that kind of stuff, just to get the perfect growth pattern. Because while it sprouts, it creates all the enzymes. All those enzymes that convert that starch to sugar, and that's what they need.
And you have to stop that. You can't
Absolutely.
let it go too far.
No, because as it grows, it eats up all the starch.
Right, to continue to grow.
Yeah.
So they get it, and then they stop it. They're like, hey, put the brakes on that. This thing's ready. Then they take it and they dump it into a big old vat, if you will, or a barrel, or what do they call it? A wash tun?
Well, they got to dry it first.
Oh, okay. So they dry. Yeah. So they might peat it. That's where they might dry it.
Then they'll dry it. Once it's sprouted to a certain level, they dry it. And you got to get all the little roots off.
That's what kills it.
Off. Yeah, they dry it. It kills the grain. You got to knock off all the little rootlets, because that's worthless. It doesn't create any.
So where they just
value.
turn it?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Monkey shoulder it.
Monkey shoulder it.
Okay. All right. So now it's dried. It's ready to actually start making alcohol from it.
Yes.
Throw it into this big old.
Grind it up, make it into a rough flour.
Okay, and that's when it gets dumped in, and they start adding water to it.
Add water.
Got to add a ton of water. So I guess we should talk about the water, because now the water's coming into it, right?
Yeah, is barley done at that point? Essentially, yeah, they've done all they can do.
At the end of they're right. Barley is ready to be converted, really. And after it's converted, it's really pretty much pitched.
So you talked a little bit about water the water to mash it, or to malt it doesn't matter too much.
No, there are 2 different types of waters when you're talking about distilleries, though. There's your water for cooling, like condensing water, and there's your water that actually ends up,
right,
in the bottle.
Yep.
So let's just talk about. We don't care about the water for cooling because at the end of the day, it
Doesn't
never
matter.
touches.
It's got to be
the alcohol.
mineral free because you don't want to foul the heat exchangers and things like that. But we won't go on that.
Right.
So yeah, if we want to do next week it'll be a full topic on water and the mineral content needed for
Cooling.
Yeah, you got
We'll
to
talk
start.
about those.
You're talking a little bit too technical there.
I know. So there's really 2 times water is important: fermentation, and well,
Why is everybody picking on me tonight, by the way?
I'm not, man.
fermentation and really diluting. Quite honestly,
Wine light.
is where it
Good
comes
to see
from.
you.
So with fermenting, I got a little container
Yes,
here
Alejandro.
of 5.2 pH stabilizer. So
But you see,
for yeast to work, you want the and to mash and all that kind of stuff to dissolve the starch. You want to have a certain acidity to it. So this is actually a buffering agent you can put into your water that'll create a little bit of pH buffering at roughly 5. I wouldn't taste
No.
that. I don't know.
Chemical.
You use like 1 tablespoon per 5 gallons in
Yeah, you don't-
when you're burying.
I'm like, hey, what
Put
the?
it in there as a little,
I wouldn't.
diffuser for your scotch.
This is maybe hazardous food grade buffering phosphates. So it's like
Yeah,
phosphoric
keep that
acid.
away from me.
So what about worm tubes?
Oh,
Well, that's different.
We'll get to that
that's
stuff.
a distillation.
So
That's true.
you're
All right,
adding
we're
some-
on the-
So you need clean water and you need minerals. There's a little bit of minerals in there for the yeast to grow on.
but the acidity,
The acidity helps with get the enzymes working and helps the yeast grow.
they want a neutral.
pH 5-ish. So it's a little on the acidic side.
Okay.
Not complete
Right.
neutral, a little
So
bit acidic.
when you look at water sources for distilleries, it varies across Scotland, right?
Yes.
I mean, vastly, right? So you go from the Northern Highlands all the way to Islay, the water sources are vastly different. They come from, a couple different places. Lochs, rivers, which they don't call them rivers, I even think,
Yeah,
and
I know what you're talking about.
pool that.
Runes or something.
Yeah, there's some names. So there's basically 3 different sources. Honestly, one of the articles I read said that some distilleries literally pull the water from the local municipality.
Yeah.
Which, hey, I guess they can do that too. They're definitely not going to be in the marketing bragging about, their water.
Yes, our water sources from Loch Bennon
But
that has
It's triple distilled.
That is that's
Right.
1,000 feet deep and has more water than all of Scotland uses in a week. No.
Well, they say though the water sources themselves is only about 2% of what you're going to get out of the. But what you don't think about is, what's one of the coolest things about Scotch in general, right? Is just the environmental stuff, all about it, and the water plays a big part of that because there's certain certain parts of the land it flows through that it gets into the taste of the whiskey, and it's especially with limestone, taking minerals out, maybe taking too much out or not enough, etc. So I mean, it's an important part, and it's really important why they pick certain sources of land around it because they want to kind of encompass that into their scotch.
Yeah, and part of that, as far as the flavor of the whiskey, I think that probably the biggest influence in the flavor of the whiskey is what it does to the yeast and the nutrients that come in with it. And depending on the perfect environment for the yeast, they will produce different esters and other aldehydes and stuff that will make a little bit of different flavor in that mash.
You lost me on aldehyde. I don't.
but
Flavor
you
component.
hit the number on the article that kind of made me scratch my head when I was reading about 2%. 2% of the flavor of the scotch that you're getting, and they're saying is imparted from the water. And I find I got to argue that there's got to be a little bit more. If the water is
I
different,
doubt it.
No.
if the water source is different and actually has a complete and utter different, if I take water from the Northern Highlands and I go down to Islay and I take a glass of water and I drink both of them, you're telling me I'm not going to notice a difference at all?
Oh, you will.
Absolutely. And
But
so
that-
how does that not translate?
Because when you distill it, the alcohol comes over and a little bit of the water comes over.
Yeah.
And the stuff that makes the water taste different is the minerals and the solids that are in that water, which don't come over when you distill it. So all the
But
salt,
you're still
all the-
flavoring. You're still flavoring. The barley and stuff, right? As far as the water process, or
a
no?
little bit. I mean, you may create a few different flavor components that come over in the distillate, but the water itself doesn't add flavor.
So
And you can what they can do is what you can do is you can take highly purified water, and then you add the minerals back you want.
Mm.
And then and so you create nutrients for the yeast, and then they will produce consistently what you want them to do, whether you're pulling it from tap water, a tap source, or whatever. Now you got to take out the chlorine and stuff like that if you're pulling from a tap system, because you don't want that to kill the yeast. But in general, it doesn't add flavor. And then so though all the components in the whiskey do affect the fermentation, but then the other key where water is probably almost more important is when you dilute it. So these come off the stills at 60, well, they barrel at 60 some %, but they come off the stills at higher than that. So they add some water to barrel, and then they add water again to dilute to put in the bottle. Now that water,
flavor it.
Yeah, but that water that they use is not, it's not from their water source.
exactly, it is highly purified.
Right.
And intentionally highly purified,
There you
because if you have minerals and stuff in that, you're going to get cloudiness.
It's going to make the point of maturation useless.
You're going to cloud your water, cloud your whiskey, and things like that. So you've just gone through chill filtering or not, and then you put in mineral water, and then it makes a cloudy whiskey. And so
Oh
that
my
stuff's
God, go away.
highly the water you put in there for coming off the still and for diluting into for bottling is all really high purified reverse osmosis water kind of stuff. So
Yeah, they're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
so that's where the water doesn't really add that much flavor. So water's kind of there because it's liquid, but
So you're at the end of the day, you're agreeing that 2% is
That's probably
probably a
about right.
sound number.
yeah.
Huh.
Hmm.
It does,
So-
but it does sound good though when you think about the
Of
earth
course
and
it does. It's a
environmental stuff.
total marketing thing. Yeah.
Huh.
Well, the other thing that we didn't talk about, so and maybe I guess you kind of did when you said minerals, but they prefer soft water as opposed to hard water. According to what I read, most distilleries, there are some that do use harder water sources because of limestone and stuff like that, but for the most part, for the fermentation process and the pH level, they prefer soft water, is what I've read.
So, well, see, that's weird because depending on where you read, in Kentucky, it's all hard water.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
limestone
It's
water,
all limestone
because
water.
all that provides all the minerals that give you that great yeast growth. Whereas a hard water or a soft water is typically more alkaline, and maybe I don't know. So that's where
So
pick a source and look at bunches of them, because it's not always perfect.
So at the end of the day, then, so from a production standpoint, water is absolutely imperative.
It's critical.
You have to have it. So
Yes.
it's part of the conversation tonight. However, the part that it plays in the actual flavoring or anything in the whiskey is minimal.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, and I will say,
Yes.
you guys, if after reading several articles on each one of these ingredients, each one of these topics, I will say there was information that was fighting each other. There was stuff that you'd read one article that says something, and you go read another article that says the exact opposite, and you're like, what the? I mean, who do I believe here? So you had to dig into more articles. You had really, there's a lot of opinion out there when it comes to this.
So we had a good question here, a comment from M. I read somewhere that a water source in contact with peat in nature can add to the peated taste of whiskey independently or in the smoking process.
So, good point. I actually read it very specific to that point in one of the articles that said no, it doesn't. That even though like water sources that are going through peated bogs and whatnot, and very like in Isla, that the water going through it really doesn't have an effect on the phenols or the peaty taste of the Scotch at all.
Yeah, I can go back and forth on that, because if there is some phenols that are in that mash that you make, that you bring over to start the distilling process, it can carry some over, because the phenols you put in to your barley come over. I mean, those distill over as part of the distillation process. So why would the phenols in the water not do the same? So again,
It's a good discussion point,
It
right?
is.
if you ask 3 distillers, you'll get 5 answers on what the importance of water.
Pour them 2 more drams and you get 5 more answers.
Exactly.
So Nurse Dave said, well, if smoke If smoke, scent, and taste will come over with the alcohol, why wouldn't any scent and taste come over with the water?
Well, and that's correct, because if phenol is a high boiler, it would come over. It would distill over with the alcohol. That's why you smoke and the barley, then that goes into the mash that ferments, and then when you distill that, it brings that out peated over.
I
So it
think
should.
I
I
think
think
water
it would.
going through peat doesn't produce the same effect or taste that burning peat and putting it into the barley, the smoke and the oil.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is probably true, because you get a concentration of that effect in the burning of the peat.
There's
Fair
a lot,
point.
A lot of chemical stuff.
Fair
happening
point.
here.
Yeah, I mean I honestly.
Sounds like we could have a whole
it's-
discussion about that.
Yeah, right.
Dr. Scotch
We
maybe needs to
set a
put that on
fire.
the
You
list.
got any peat down here, Drew? Let's spark this thing
Let's
up.
see if this works.
Spark went off.
We'll have to take
All right.
this
Hey,
show
watch
out
it.
to the fire pit and see what happens. So, all right, now we've put some water in and we've cranked up the temperature, and this barley is doing
This
what?
mash and stuff.
It's just
sitting
getting
there,
warm,
warming up.
But we got to
heating up.
add
You
something
don't
else.
too warm.
But we still have to add something else for the active ingredient, if you
It's
will.
the Kickstarter.
Right. What's the spark that starts all this?
I don't know. What is that?
Is it same thing in bread?
It's the same thing in bread, but it's not the same thing in bread when it comes to distilling.
No.
And it's not just your normal yeast. It's a
No.
specific.
So distiller's yeast is different than pretty much any yeast you can deal with. I mean, so the funny thing is, even distillers will say, brewing for distilling is easy, brewing for beer is hard, because when you brew for beer, they're tasting your beer directly, and so that yeast is really important. And you need, you can do all sorts of weird English yeasts and stout yeasts and pale ale yeasts and all these kind of things to create a different flavor profile. Well, with distilling, you lose all that. You lose most of that when you distill it.
Sure.
So yeast is probably less important, but it can create some components.
So,
But isn't yeast like derived from like one master
well,
yeast?
yes,
eventually?
but let's back up even further. Let's go way back. Let's take the history timeline. 1950, pre-1950s, right? They were using brewer's yeast, and they were using various different breeds.
Yeah.
And so, sometime in the 1950s, they come up with a strain of yeast, and I don't know if that's the actual name. It's called M, and basically,
Cereal,
from that period, from the 1950s on, it's that strain. That's like the main, the DNA from that strain is what is used in Scotch whiskey all across the board. Not so much in the American whiskey, in the bourbon world, where there are distilleries that literally culture and have their strain of yeast, and it's like, the Holy Grail. They keep that little thing alive, and they keep pulling off of it to make more yeast.
yeah.
That's not what happens in the Scotch world. It's all this one strain. There's a few variations of that strain, I guess.
Yeah, because as strains, yeast are notorious for changing their DNA. They adapt, and so they'll get mutations and things that will change what they put out. So depending on the distillery, they will be very careful about their culture, or they'll kind of let it go and let it kind of drift. And that may be a reason why the blends are so much better in the 70s, because they had a different yeast strain essentially
Okay,
than they
I
do
see.
now. But right now, I think it's probably more of a science than an art, that you pretty much want to add a same shot of the same yeast every time if you can.
So
Okay.
they don't change the yeast recipe.
Generally not. I mean, most of these distillers you talk to, they will try and create the same new make every time, and then use barrels to kind of change their recipe. With the exception of like Balvenie will do a peat week and things like, and Balcones will do peated.
So I watched the show years ago. I can't remember the guy, the show, Whiskey Traveler or something like that. He went on just all over the world and stuff, and he found this place in Germany, and they made beer. And he went to this house where the yeast derived from, and it was downstairs in this old cottage, in a refrigerator tucked back in the. I mean, it's like been there for like hundreds and hundreds of years. Are we talking this type of yeast for over there as well?
You just scrape it off the wall? I don't get it.
They basically have some secret yeast recipe that they always start with that.
Oh, I know Budweiser is very careful about the yeast strain they use for Budweiser. I mean, it is the exact
And they
strain.
shouldn't
Well, so that's the thing. So they're working on yield. So beer brewers are the
No
same
sponsors
way.
up there.
is that they have? Yeah, I guess we'll write them off. Because
KB.
when I was in Missouri, we did a chemical engineering tour of Anheuser-Busch Brewery in St. Louis, and they have a locked lab, an incubator where they keep their yeast, and there's like 2 people in the company that have the key, and they start
It's
from
like
the
a
same
queen
strain.
bee.
It is absolutely.
Key inside, right? Turn 1, 2, 3. Turn,
Yeah.
open it
That's
up.
crazy.
Yeah, because they want a consistent product, and so they use the same yeast brand every time.
Yeah. So this yeast, when you add all the different variables, whether it's yeast, the pH level, mineral level of the water,
All that.
the variation in yield of the barley, and how much sugar it produces, all of that, all those variables are what make up the recipe for the new make of a specific distillery. So I'm Distillery A, you're Distillery B. I have a new make recipe that I want to produce the same new make every time. My variables differ from yours, whether it's yeast, whether it's water, and hardness, softness, pH level of that water, and the type of barley and how much sugar that barley produces. All of that changes the effect of my new make.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think we didn't talk about was the temperature of the fermentation.
Does it regulate?
Well, depends on who you talk to, because I know when you're brewing beer, the temperature makes a huge effect, and you want to, if you do it too warm, then you get certain flavors. If you do it too cold, you get certain flavors, all that kind of things. But according to the couple of articles that Mark produced, they don't control really that much, and quite honestly, I think that's whenever you have like a wooden washback fermentation, then you don't really have much temperature control. And so it can be anywhere from 20 degrees C to 33 degrees C, depending on the temperature of the day in their room while they're doing the fermentation. So
Well, I'm
would
sure
think that
that's
has
part
more
of a
effect.
secret recipe too, as far as what they heat it to. But at the end of the day, there's probably a certain amount they have to go to, right, for it to.
yeah, it's got to be essentially room temperature for the yeast to grow.
Right.
But and if you go above 40, then you got.
I mean, somebody mentioned earlier, it's kind of like KFC spices. It's really a combination of so many different
Totally
things.
different things. Yeah.
That's what makes it kind of unique. But that's the same. But the same concept for the most part, you've mentioned a few times, is the same concept in making beer.
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
Essentially, right? It's not quite. It's a step further, if you will, right? They distill it. That's the big difference,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So, Sunday Evening Scotch says it's a serious business. Wild turkey's yeast is old AF.
And that's true.
How old is that? Like AD or is that BC or? Spell that out.
Are you trying to be funny here?
Just messing.
What do you?
Oh, what's this?
What do you?
Look, I wanted to
KB.
point this out.
KB,
son of a
is
gun.
in the house.
Cheers to good yeast. Yes.
It's good to see you, my friend.
Because without yeast, there would be
Cheers.
nothing in the glass to get you
Cheers,
intoxicated.
gents.
Cheers, KB. Thank you, sir. Good to see you on.
Because you can make a weak beer.
Mark,
That
was
is a
quick.
good dram.
The green.
Wow.
Oh no,
What?
this
The SMWS.
yeah, it is.
Yeah,
the
that
green
SMWS.
actually is good too.
I'm gonna have a little bit of that malt.
I'm
but
savoring that SMWS because it's
so
sweet
flavorful.
and rich and flavorful, even
So-
with a lot of water.
We've taken it from where did we start? We started with barley, and then we went into water and yeast. And at the end of the day, that's kind of like a high fly-through level of what it takes to make a Scotch, right?
It's the main ingredients. You can't make Scotch without those.
Right. So, I mean, technically, that's a lie. That's what it takes to distill it, new make, because
Yes.
it's not Scotch yet,
True.
right?
That's what you need to make vodka too.
Right. So,
The production of Scotch.
yeah, we've got it to that point. Now we need to talk about the next step of putting it in some barrel and aging it for at least 3 years inside the borders of Scotland, and then we can
Do
call
they do
it.
that?
Then we can call it Scotch.
Barrels are important.
Well, I mean, yeah, wood
That'd
is
be-
definitely
Hey, we
important.
That'd
did
be
a
a
live
good-
show on barrels.
That'd
That
be a
was
good
good
topic.
conversation.
So,
No idea.
but I mean, so we talked. We got you to that point. The new make, the distill it. We've got this white lightning coming out of a still, and it's awesome. And what are we gonna do with it? Before we can bottle it and call it Scotch, we've got to age it for 3 years somewhere.
At least.
Right? At least 3 years somewhere.
Yep.
And I'm curious to even start the conversation of what the cost of that was. What did it take us to get here? But
The production
Yeah.
cost into the maturation.
man.
right,
stage.
just before we even barrel it. So we've got white light coming out of the stills right now into the spirit safe, and we're watching it. How much did that liquid cost us to this point? I don't know. I mean, it's,
Well, I'm sure it's up there a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, and a lot of, quite honestly, probably a lot of it is capital costs and labor costs.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the grain.
The barley.
Because
and
I was doing some research and I did find like how many
water's free.
water's cheap.
Essentially.
But well, the thing about water is it's like what 100 gallons per liter of whiskey or something like that. It takes water between mashing and between malting. The water to saturate the grain to malt it. Then you dry that out. Then you grind it. Then you mash it to ferment or to get the starch out. And then you add more water to ferment. And then you distill it. And you need cooling water to do that.
That's right.
And then you need cleaning water to clean out all your equipment. I mean, there's tons of water that's needed. And so there's that.
Richie Z, thanks, buddy.
so,
Sean's basically working late tonight. He's got he's actually opening a second restaurant right now, so he's working on that. So we hope to see him maybe later, but it doesn't look like it at this point.
yeah, it's not looking
we miss
good.
him.
But Richie,
thanks
thank you,
for
man. It's
the,
good to see you
feedback.
too, Richie. I haven't talked to you in a long time, man. Hope you're doing well. So I'm trying this malt. So this is a blended malt, by the way. There's obviously
Johnny
everybody
Walker.
knows Johnny Walker
Island
Green.
Green.
Everybody knows Johnny Walker Green is a blended malt. This is the Island Green, which is a blended malt as well.
Travel retail, I believe.
You bought this
I did.
on a
Long time.
cruise, dude.
Yeah, I did.
You
Back
brought
when,
this
back
on-
when people could cruise.
Don't you wish you were back
You
in
can
the
cruise right now
islands?
if you want to.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yourself.
I want to.
I'll take a little cruise.
Maybe a little one, but yeah, it's good. I forgot how good it was. I'm glad I actually have 2 bottles. Look.
Of the green Island Green?
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know you bought 2 bottles. Look at you getting all freaking geeky on us, man.
So I got a few back there.
So
but,
let's wrap
so
up.
you were talking about water. I cut you off a little bit. You talked about the water concentration value as far as how much.
Oh
it
yeah.
takes.
So I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, there's lots of water that goes into it, and only a little bit of it is actually in the whiskey.
Right, that makes sense. So, but the good thing is most distilleries, it's like any distillery really, tries to get close to a water source. I know we were at Castle and Key down in Kentucky, and that was a really cool.
Man, it was
that was
cool.
such a really cool tour we got of distillery. It's the same kind of concept anywhere when you make distillery, but it's so important when they pick locations to look at the water source.
Yeah.
It's absolutely imperative because they want something rich in limestone to pull out a lot of those minerals and stuff. And obviously, they coming from the hills, etc. And so, to your point, though, I mean, it takes a lot of water. So you want to be close to a water source that produces a lot of water.
I mean, even moonshiners are close to water so they can cool they can condense their stills.
I mean, it's liquid. What's the liquid
well,
in there?
but again, the moonshiners need it for cooling to condense the vapor.
Sure.
Condense the still, and that's what's a big deal. And there's lots of ways to do that, and that's where the worm tub that was mentioned really early, where you basically run the copper into a big coil in this big drum, and you trickle water into it, and that cools the distillate and takes it from vapor into liquid, and you can collect that.
Stills E and Kevin Bloom. I'm just calling out a few new names that I see in the chat. It's good to see. Hey, Travis Faircloth. You're killing me, man. You're killing me, Travis. Love you, buddy. He's helping me grow my Scotch collection.
Yeah, that's
the
helpful.
bunker commander. over
One
there.
bottle at a time. That's not
So
true.
we've gone through. I mean, it's been a pretty good conversation so far.
It is.
We geeked out a little bit. Hopefully you guys have stayed with us a lot. But
Sorry.
No, it's good. I mean, I appreciate it. It's good for replay as well. So I mean, the 3 major ingredients. Have we left anything else? Do you want to talk about the next level? What happens after this?
Well, that's the next conversation, honestly. I mean, because that's a whole nother conversation.
And we
when you
talked
talk
about still shape and all that.
Well,
before.
we didn't really get into still shape. We have before. Somebody did bring it up in the comment. And to
One
answer a
tub,
comment, KB, yes, the hardness does definitely make a difference in how much, what happens during fermentation as far as how much sugar can be converted into alcohol.
And then when you add that water back to dilute, either for barreling or bottling,
Sure.
makes a big difference.
So there is a difference in that. But the next step, as to your point, Drew, is the maturation process. And where do we put this new distillate? What do we do with it now? We got this white lightning. Where do we put it? And where do we store it? How do we do that? And then when do we finally make the determination to put it in some bottle? And what does that mean? So yeah, there are some further
That's something we haven't
conversations.
talked about is aging and the rick house versus the India versus Taiwan
versus Scotland.
Kentucky.
Well, that's a
all
whole
the different.
that could be a whole
do you
night,
do it in a rick
actually.
house? Do you do it in a dunnage house? That is
On
really
a coast
interesting.
next to the sea, there's all kinds of
that's a-
influences.
That's probably a
that
good
have
topic
That is a
for a
good
good
topic.
show, really,
Yeah.
because we could talk for a good hour on that one at least.
Easily.
I mean, oh man, when I think about
Especially when
that,
you get into different areas of
You
not
know,
just Scotch.
I can remember talking to Malcolm and Steph about one of the dunnage houses at Old Pulteney, and it's like famous. It's like this one wall of this one area of the dunnage house. That, I mean, it's the oldest, dungiest, humid.
It gets the
but
most work, right?
you think about you going to India and think about how they have to rotate casks.
Well, Kentucky the same way.
Yeah, Kentucky. I mean, you get a cask up at the top of the dunnage house. You ain't keeping it up there long, buddy. You better get it that. I mean, they need it on conveyor belts.
I mean, I visited Maker's Mark, and I think they age for 4 years in the middle, and they age for. So if the barrel's in the middle of the rick house, they can do it for 4 years. If it's in the top, they can only keep it up there for like
18 months or something.
well, yeah, like 2 years, and then they have to move it to the bottom. Then once from the bottom, move up to the top, so they catch up. It's it's all aged 4 years, but they have to move them if they're in different parts of the rick house.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother conversation, and it could be broken into several conversations when you talk about, first fill, refill,
Oh my God.
shaved, toasted,
Yeah.
and some of these, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I don't know if it was on the show or pre-show, but we were talking about like sherry barrels that are, they're not even, what are they calling them?
Season.
Not even, no, there was
no,
different,
they're
sherry
treated?
influenced or something.
What?
I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, sherry treated,
It's
right?
fake. It's fake. It's
It's
basically
like-
like candy coating.
Well, they spray it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
but that's because
Hey,
there
Jason.
aren't real Scotch barrels.
So is it even legal to pump sherry into a barrel and then pressurize it to push the sherry into the wood?
Sure
and
it
then,
is.
It is.
Yeah, so
Sure it is. I mean, that's the thing is, when you read
Hey,
these
Master John.
labels, and we're getting off a tangent here, but when you read these bottles, you're like sherry cask finish and all that blah 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 blah. You don't really know exactly what the process is.
Right.
There's a lot of trust there, right? And then that's part of the journey though, is understanding. You kind of have a rapport with these distilleries and be like, oh yeah, they produce good stuff, and some of them may not, or you're not sure of, and then you're on the journey to find out what really is the best bang for your buck on flavor profile. If somebody says to me, this is the best sherry cask influence I've ever had, and you find out that it's treated or something like that, you're like, well, okay, maybe I know something
Maybe
now.
just I'm tasting the sherry.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So Bobby
So,
J.
Bobby J.
Bobby J,
thank
thank
you,
you, sir.
man.
Thank you, Bobby J. I think actually he gave us an opportunity to try a grain.
He did.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
got a bottle of grain.
What am I
Single
gonna?
grain
What
for
am
me.
I've had everything on the bar here.
Well, I got to hit that island green here.
Well,
So
look for something in the back there.
I want to
Don't let
Bobby
him-
J.
don't let him go that way.
He can go wherever he wants to. I don't care. As long as his some bottles he knows better not to open.
Yeah,
As long as the paper's or the foil's off, you can open it, right? If the foil's not off, don't open it.
bananas.
Yeah,
with sprinkles.
We hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight. We got on a little tangent, some nerdy talk there, but sometimes it's kind of fun to get in these topics. And
Well, I mean that's, if you like whiskey, what we talked about today, approaches all whiskey, whether it be bourbons or American whiskeys or whatever, because they all need water, they all need yeast, and they all
well, I'm sorry, last one over there.
That's all right. This one
and they all
sounded
need grain.
interesting.
Now, admittedly, depending on who you talk to, do you need barley? You actually do need barley, because the malted barley is what provides the enzymes for all whiskey.
Zach, he did.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I owe Bobby J a toast. Thank you, sir. And Zach Andrews, I owe you one as well. Thank you.
What do you want, KB?
What's he doing? Drew.
But you were talking about barley.
Yeah.
We got
Yeah, so the barley that malted barley is what produces the enzymes for really all grains. So if you put corn in there, you need the enzymes from the barley to be able to do that. If you put rye in there, you need the enzymes from the barley to convert those starches, because those other grains don't have as much as high potency of the enzymes as the barley does.
So, man, I don't know how much time we have to ask the question, but now you're really confusing me. Now, I mean, didn't even give it any thought in researching any of this because I was researching Scotch. But let's take it over to the American side. All right, bourbon. It's 51% corn, right?
Yes.
You're telling me that corn doesn't produce the starches that can be converted?
It has the starches, but it doesn't have the enzymes to convert.
So,
at least not at the potency and consistency of barley.
really? So, at the end of the day, a bourbon is 51% corn. It's got a high percentage of barley as well. To
Not
help.
necessarily a high percentage. You don't need that much. So if you use a barley, a malted barley that's got a high enzyme content, and I don't know, I forget what what the term is. You can add like 5% barley and 80%, 90% corn, and it'll have enough of the enzymes to be able to convert all that starch. Because you need to malt something to get those enzymes going. You can't just take corn.
So they don't malt corn.
I don't think I know of malting corn. I don't think they do.
This-
Malted,
I don't. I
This is a
mean,
malted corn
so
for you.
what other kind
Well,
of
there
grains?
is a malted
Let's-
corn though, because I think like mellow corn, I think maybe
Yeah,
malted.
let's-
Mellow corn? Really?
Yeah, if Bud Matthews is on, he would be able to tell us.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we got some bourbon guys that could
But
probably tell us.
we think about other different. What are the other grains, right? So barley, obviously Scotch. But so we get over here on this side of the pond. You know, what else are we talking about? We'll name some other grain. Let's go over to
Well,
Scotland.
you have rye, you
Not
have
non-barley.
wheat,
So we got
You
some
can
good
have a
grains,
rye Scotch technically.
No, because
Why?
yes, you can.
Why can't
Because-
you have a rye Scotch?
Is that in the list of available
It's a
of legal
grain.
grains?
Yes.
You did a grain whiskey from rye.
Yep.
Well, if that's
Maybe.
the case, you think you would see one by now.
Yeah,
I just don't think they're. You can have it. I mean, it's just like any. So what's a single grain? We know what single malt is. What's a single grain? You know it is single grain. Name the grain.
It doesn't have to be a single grain. So a single grain means that it's a grain whiskey from
Okay,
a single distillery.
Name another grain that they use in.
Wheat,
Okay.
rye,
Okay.
corn.
Rye, corn.
Yeah,
So why can't we just use all rye?
There's got to be a reason. We're just messing.
you can,
No, I think you
but
can.
it's still
And I
a
asked
grain.
that. I read that in one of the articles I was reading about the barley. It point blank said you can have a rye Scotch, and I was like, really? I never heard of one. Not saying they're not out
Yeah,
there.
corn, rye, wheat, and barley is pretty much mostly bourbon. Yeah.
Often they choose either rye or wheat.
Yeah, like Maker's Mark is wheated, Wild Turkey is rye, and so that's kind of their thing.
Right.
It's just interesting. I mean, obviously, my mind and my passion and love is in the barley world, so
Yeah.
I really don't pay much attention on that. We did a tour of Widow Jane, remember, in Jersey, and they were using blue corn. It was that was some crazy. I was like, what are you doing with that stuff? But
Well, yeah, that
it
was
cool.
interesting.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are probably getting close to winding up, and it was actually a fun little journey of a conversation to go through how do we make Scotch.
I just want to say to this guy in the middle here, I think we need to start filming you because you're really good at this
I keep
stuff.
trying, but you won't.
I know,
my
you know.
Someone's
Now there's no
getting beat
excuse.
up.
I have it all set up right here.
No, it's true. So
You're really
it's,
good at this stuff.
It's really easy to talk when you have people asking questions and all this kind of stuff, and I got some notes. But when you put that camera on me by myself, I'm like,
It's funny. 5 years into this, and he freezes looking at the camera. by
it's
himself.
weird. It is weird because I want to engage with you as a viewer, but then I got to look at my notes and I feel it breaks. And so whatever. But we'll see.
We'll make it work for
Old
you.
Portero is malted rye whiskey.
What?
Look,
Who said that?
Co-N, right at the very top of the comments. Scroll up just a wee bit.
My mouse is messing up.
Right there.
Oh yeah.
And I want to get a bottle of it. I just want to taste it. I sample. I don't
Rye's
need a
got
bottle.
that
I just want to.
spiciness and yeah.
What the hell does that taste like, right? I mean,
Interesting.
it's you can geek out on this to the nth degree because I'm stuck in the
You're getting
Scotch
called
world.
out.
You want to go to the
Well,
other
we
side.
know each other, so
Who's coming?
he says that I sound like Dr. Scotch.
Yeah,
I don't
they're close
understand
buddies.
that.
Close buddies. They hang out. They drink
Alrighty.
Scotch all together.
Exactly.
Well, it was a fun show, guys. Good comments. I appreciate you guys watching tonight. I learned a lot, actually, listening to you guys.
It was
so
fun, man.
cool.
It was
I
a
mean,
good
cool.
The
conversation.
chemistry and manufacturing, all that is cool.
It's definitely, you think about, if you look at what, making beer or scotch or whiskey, like, just give me some barley, some water, throw it in the tub.
Well,
no.
you can,
You
but
can. It'd be crap. Be crap. But it's really, honestly, especially when you think about all the things you said tonight, you geeked out a lot because there's a reason for it. It's a lot of chemistry. There really is. There's
Biochemistry.
there's
man.
so many little things that make up the ingredients and what you're doing, whether it's heat, whether it's the water, whether it's the barley, whether it's the, you can go on and on. And so that's why, when you're out there matching this stuff, those guys are walking around with clipboards knowing every
absolutely.
single thing.
Yep.
Whiskey, Wine Light Media.
We get there.
Scroll up a little bit. Wine Light Media, right there, atop. Wine. No. I just poured another glass. Andrew was great tonight. Cheers.
Well,
See,
thank you, Wine
that's what I'm
Light.
talking about, man.
I love talking about processes
Molly is
like
Dr.
that.
Scotch. That's right, Sending is Scotch. Okay.
Molly, that's what it is.
All right,
So
all right.
we're going to take it over to the post show for a few minutes
Yep.
and see what's going on. But fun show tonight. Let's wrap up. And what were the 3 ingredients that Eric Waite started us off on? Bagpipes, kilts, and what?
I don't know.
Haggis.
Oh, haggis.
Haggis, yeah, something like that.
Haggis,
Oh, that's
bagpipes,
good
and
stuff.
bird.
But cheers, everyone at home. Thank you so much for joining in on
Thank you,
Thursday. Podcasters that are listening. Cheers.
We'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely.
Cheers.